Is NHL Sense Arena worth the cost? You know what? Let's talk about that. Let's be honest, hockey is not cheap. An extra ice time can cost over $150 an hour, and hockey camps cost hundreds. With NHL Sense Arena, you're getting access to hundreds of drills and training plans starting at $33 a month, where you can practice on a schedule that works for you. And new content is constantly added to the game. From new arenas to practice in, weekly challenges with their season mode, and new drills like the recently released USA Hockey training plans. This is such a great training tool for any hockey player or goalie. While hockey is definitely expensive, this is just over $1 a day. So what are you waiting for? Level up your off-ice hockey training with NHL Sense Arena.
And remember, gang, for listeners of Our Kids Play Hockey programming, we're offering $50 off an annual plan. Just head over to hockey.sensearena.com and use the code HockeyNeverStops at checkout. Again, that's hockey.sensearena.com. Use our code HockeyNeverStops at checkout and take your child's off-ice training to a new reality with NHL Sense Arena 25. Now, let's get you into this episode on the Our Kids Play Hockey Network. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias with Christy Casciano Burns and Mike Benelli, and as you know, our show aims to spark conversations in youth and minor hockey to help the game evolve. Today, we're talking with Kevin Shire from Top Sports, an organization revolutionizing youth sports with a multi-sport model that delays specialization and supports long-term athletic development. You're going to want to hear what that means. It's based in Toronto. Top Sports proudly claims to be the home of the multi-sport athlete. Getting it a little clearer here. What they do is offer a seasonal schedule where athletes can play hockey, soccer, and lacrosse, all within the same organization. That sounds like a dream to me. Kevin is the co-founder and executive director of the program, which started in 2017. He's also a former OJHL MVP, All-Star, and assistant captain, in addition to being a former Division I NCAA athlete. We should mention for the purposes of the show that Kevin also played high school football, lacrosse, and baseball, in addition to hockey. That's an awesome resume. Kevin, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thanks, Lee. We're happy to be here and looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, we're going to have one, man. I want to dive right into this because, as I said in the pre-show, this is something I actually want our audience to hear. We need to share what you're doing with the world because it is such an innovative approach and a fresh way of thinking. So let's just start with what led you to founding this program and what the reception was at the start.
Yeah, no, it's so we patterned this after Westminster Prep School in Connecticut. One of my colleagues and co-founders went to Westminster. His dad was the athletic director for like 25, 30 years. Luke Earl is his name. Luke's from Connecticut, moved to Toronto about 10 years ago. He works in finance full time. He had a 7-year-old kid. Started him in the traditional hockey system up here in Toronto, which is, as you may know, the self-proclaimed mecca of minor hockey, which, you know, is a bit of a oxymoron.
Self-proclaimed, yeah.
Very self-proclaimed. So he started him in hockey up here, his oldest, and just found that it was, amongst other things, incredibly hyper-competitive, toxic, you know, very negative, focused on more of the, you know, the egos of coaches and parents as opposed to the development of children.
Sounds
and
familiar.
so he and myself and Ian, our third co-founder, basically got together and, you know, thought, what if we could create a different path that led to the same result? And it was as simple as that. We fell into it. It wasn't this grand business plan or idea that came together over 15 years. It was very much a conversation over a beer and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we started this program? That was 2017. We had, I think in July leading up to the hockey season, we had 5 kids. 3 of them were Luke's kids. So we were, you know, slim
a
pickings.
True startup. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we were slim pickings. So we finished that year with about 25 or 26 hockey players. And then from there, we've layered on soccer and lacrosse, and we've got a large summer camps program. We run some clinics and stuff, and it's grown exponentially since there.
So I want to say again for the audience, just in case I went through that intro too fast. This is one organization for the kids that run 3 different sports within the organization. So for those of you listening in the United States, they're not jumping from team to team to team to team, sport to sport. They don't have 16 things during the day. They have an annual curriculum. Maybe there's a little bit of overlap, but you play these sports differently with the same organization, similar coaches. I mean, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea. It's like one-stop shop. I mean, I feel like I'm getting a deal with it, but I wanted to make sure that's clear before we really keep diving into this. And how many kids do you have in there today in the program?
As of today, we're about 1,000.
Wow.
So we see about it's almost a third between the 3 sports, which is great.
That's awesome.
And you know, we fell into this. This was not by design. We've evolved a lot along the way. We learned a ton. Youth sports is, as you all know, is a very tricky, organizational kettle of fish. And, for us, we're just trying to give a little bit more nuance and perspective to the long-term journey. It's not about, winning the race to like who's the best 8-year-old hockey team in Toronto. It's about developing athletes and people over the long term. And I think that's what drove us to start this. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and it's often that type of perspective is lost. I mean, there's a ton of keeping up with the Joneses, or I have to do what you do because my kid's going to fall behind if I don't. And for us, it's just like, let's take a deep breath. Let's realize what sports are about in the long term. All roads end to beer league in every sport. So if we can provide our kids with a great experience that builds character and gives them the opportunity to play multiple sports in the same year without having to specialize at like 8 or 9, then I think that's a win for us. And, ultimately, we're just trying to leave sports a little bit better than we found it. And that's the impetus to what we do.
How young do you start them? And do you play teams that are just similar to you, or do you play other organized sports teams? And do you divide them up into what age brackets?
It's a great question. So our youngest age is 4. Now, I will preface that by saying 4-year-olds, it's learn to play. We're talking about building passion for sport. We're talking about the fundamentals and ensuring they have a great positive experience at the beginning so they continue to play. When the kids turn 7 or 8, they can pick either a competitive stream or recreational stream. And the best part about our program is they can move interchangeably between the two as they develop. So we call it an open roster system. So we're not setting a 7-year-old hockey team at 7 and never making changes. There's late bloomers. There's kids who maybe don't have the commitment level to play on a competitive team or don't want to, or their parents don't want to. There's a host of reasons why. So at 7 or 8, we go into a competitive and recreational stream. And then from there, the recreational stream is all in-house. So it's sort of like a house league program. For hockey, soccer, lacrosse, we run different leagues internally. And then for the competitive side, on hockey and soccer, we're sanctioned by the national governing bodies here in Canada. So soccer, we play in like the Toronto Soccer Association, and hockey, we play in the GTHL, which is a unique alternative because for us, we actually only do tournaments for hockey. So it's not a regular season schedule. It's just a tournament-based schedule, which allows us to control the schedule across all 3 sports a little bit better. So if we were playing in a league, we would be at the behest of the schedule. With tournaments, it's a little bit easier just to control, the variables, if you will. So it's a great question. I mean, it escalates or it scales as the kids get older, for sure. The competitive element of it gets a little bit increased every year over year. But the starting point is 4 with us.
That's very interesting because, I mean, a lot of times you feel like it's one size fits all when you're in a youth organization. And as you pointed out, kids develop at different ages and, some get more advanced, others are back. Some want the competition, others don't. And it's hard to find good fits oftentimes, where it seems like you really cater to the needs of the kid rather than the kid having to fit your model.
I think that's a great way to summarize it. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. I mean, one of the biggest challenges here in Toronto is lack of available ice time. And so I wish we could have like a multi-tier system from, select to single A to double A to triple A and so on. The reality is we have enough ice to support 1 or 2 teams per age group. Okay. A small learn to play program with soccer and lacrosse, just because of the availability of fields, it's much easier to have a larger development pathway. But with hockey, just because of ice, it's tricky. So we try to cater to kind of the middle common denominator. If you think of youth hockey as a pyramid, we're in the middle 50%. We're not at the top 10%, like the kind of AAA crazy, elite, which I hate the word, but it is what it is.
All-star showcase.
Yeah. Quadruple A. Yeah, exactly. And then, the bottom 10% is sort of this transactional house league drop-in style program, which has its time and place. We're kind of in the middle. We're at the upper end of the competitive spectrum without going overboard, but we're also not sort of like a one-stop house league program.
We should also say though, Christy, and Kevin confirmed this, like it's not the goal to be a AAA, quadruple A, right? That's not the goal of this organization. Now, if someone ascends to that, that's an awesome success story.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For sure. So our whole philosophy on that is we are only as good as what the kids want. So if the kids are at the level where they're far surpassing what we can offer, we will actually go and find them a new place to play. We will work with the parent, we'll work with the kid, and myself and Ian are very involved day to day, and we have a fair amount of network connections here in the city. So we'll work with the kid that wants to go play AAA and help them find a spot to play. We had a couple instances last year of that on the soccer side, same with hockey. So we're doing this hopefully for the right reasons. We're not trying to, control the power of where kids play. We're trying to help kids develop. And then, if it's not with us or with us, that's great, because it just means we've done our job and they're developing at the next level.
Well, Mike and I and Christy talk all the time on the show. Sometime around March or April, everyone starts looking at every other team here. Mike, we've talked 100 times about the grass is always greener on the other side. Here's a guy saying he'll help you find a better team.
Wow.
This is amazing to me. But Mike, I got to get your take on that, because, and again, we all deal with it in the United States, the player movement, the jumping, most of the time a lateral jump, right? Mike, I just need your initial thoughts on this as someone ingrained in hockey.
Well, first you're giving a lot of leeway on the March, April looking. I think it started.
Yeah,
already.
it's more like January. My
October,
bad.
So, people are already looking for programs for next year. I mean, I just saw a 2025 tryout posting over the weekend.
Oh my
So that was
goodness.
that's fun to
The
see.
season hasn't
So
even
Kevin,
started here.
So it's nuts. So Kevin, I think so. Just tell us really quickly about the process here of the fact that what you do is create an atmosphere where kids want to come. They obviously develop very quickly. They're getting a lot more practice time, training time over game time, it sounds like to me. So maybe talk about the element of, well, two things. The element of fun in there, because it can't all be drills, right? It can't just be, and people want competition, because that's every dad's going to say, well, my kid's got to compete. If he's not competing, how can he get better? You got to play the best to be the best. So obviously there's a lot of components of fun that you build into your program, and just watching what you do at your program and talking to a couple of people in Toronto, like what that fun doesn't have to be you're playing tiddlywinks. Like fun can be competition, obviously,
sure.
and you're doing that.
I just like to hear Mike say tiddlywinks.
And the other side of that
put
is
that out there real quick.
Put that on a roll. So I think the other aspect of that then is, because of the way you're developing kids and how quickly they're probably improving and getting better, when does that become like, oh, I'm too good for the level I'm at, I've got to get out of here? But the fact is they've gotten that good because of the environment they're in. And maybe talk a little bit about how you weigh that with your customers.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, fun has to be the center of everything we do. We're talking about children. Most of them can't tie their shoes. They sleep with a nightlight on. They get rides to school. Like, these are not mini professional athletes. These are not mini NHL or Olympic players. These are kids. So especially below the age of like 12, I would say, when it's considered grassroots hockey, fun has to be at the center of everything we do. And I think fun gets misused or maybe misunderstood with some people as it is playing tiddlywinks, or you're playing octopus the whole time you're on the ice. And that's just not true. There's ways to infuse fun activities into practice that are conducive to learning. If you're trying to teach a one-on-one or a two-on-one or body position, why not create a small area game that the kids think is just a game, but they're actually learning time and space, or how to close down gaps, or how to angle players to the boards? I mean, I think all of it has to come down to what are kids going to enjoy? Because if kids are going to enjoy it, they're going to stick around for longer. If they stick around for longer, they're going to develop. And that's just, that's with our program or with any program. The whole idea with sports is to keep as many kids as possible playing in the best environment possible for as long as possible. And that, to us, is kind of what we do, what we're trying to do. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. We make mistakes, and, talk about tryouts. I mean, that's an imperfect system to begin with. But Mike, to your point, it has to start with fun. It has to come back to, why do kids play sports? The first answer to that question should always be because they love it. And I think that for us is kind of what drives us to continue. And then as the kids get older and as they get more developed and more competitive, I mean, for me, the conversations we have with parents all the time is, if they're thinking about moving on, or if they want to try out for a varsity team, or, whatever the case is, well, why do they want to do that? Are you driving the bus as a parent, or is the kid driving the bus? And for us, it has to start with the kid. If the kid wants to do it, we will support them. If the parent is pushing them unnecessarily to a different direction, or maybe they're not ready for that, or it's to serve the ego of somebody that's not the kid, then I think that's where the problems start. And for us, we have placed kids in programs that are not ours. We've placed a number of soccer players in sort of provincial level competitive clubs, which are higher level than us. We've placed kids in hockey that are now at the AAA level that are doing great. And, it is in part, I think, to the development we're able to offer. But I think what I'm most proud of is that they want to continue to develop because of the passion they learned or developed through our program. And at some point, we'll see a kid play college hockey or maybe professionally, which, is more in spite of us as opposed to because of us. And I think that, we are a cog in the wheel. We are not, the end all be all. And I think a lot of people have a different perspective on that, or some anyway. But that's just the way we look at it. And again, we're trying to do things the right way and provide some perspective in this whole craziness that's youth sports.
Right. And it does sound like you're ahead of the game, because all the most recent studies show kids are quitting sports at the age of 13. They're out because it's not fun anymore. It feels more like a job than it does a sport. And parents have a lot to do with that. As you said, sometimes egos get in the way, but there's a lot of pressure from parents for their kids to, specialize and be the best. And, they're doing clinics year round. How much have parents embraced this new philosophy that you're spreading? Do they see the light?
Well, I think it depends on the parent, and that's a bad answer, but I think it very much depends. I mean, some parents are hell-bent on AAA or bust, or, they want to see their kid play at the elite level. And you know what? That's fine. I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm not here to call anybody out. We are offering a specific model to the parent who wants their kids to play multiple sports, who want them to be coached by amazing, positive role models, who want them to learn character skills through sports. And if that's not your thing, there's 100 other options down the street that you can talk about, right?
It just boggles my mind that might not be the thing.
Well,
that's where I get lost all the time.
It's true. Come on,
for sure.
Oh, it's 100% true.
Any hockey rink,
it's just,
and you'll see it.
If you, Kevin, what you just said, so I cut you off. I apologize, but like what you said spoke directly to me as a parent. Like, good role models, multi-sport. You're gonna be active. You're gonna do these things. It's like, who in the right mind? They don't listen to the shows. I don't mind saying it. Like, who in the right mind would look at that and be like, no, AAA looks a lot better than this? I mean, to me, this is a conduit to discovering those opportunities, right? I'm going to say this again. I should have said this at the top of the show. Every study, not some studies, every study shows multiple sports are a must if you want to succeed athletically. There's no data to prove otherwise. We still go, listen, we're going to play hockey for 15 months straight, and all 15 months of the year, and we're going to make this work. It's like, that's why I wanted to have you on. That's why we all wanted you on, is because like you're speaking common sense, which is not common in this world, because we say it every show. The hockey world is crazy. You're not crazy, right? So I'm sorry. I had to reiterate what you just said. Like, who would not want to hear that as a parent? That just spoke to everything it is to be a parent. I apologize. Please continue.
No, not at all. I mean, to your point, like I don't think it's with any ill will that parents get down that rabbit hole.
Sure,
and I see it a lot. Like, I don't think it's intentional. I do think there's an element of keeping up with the Joneses, or
absolutely
doing what somebody else is. Like, competitive nature gets in everyone's head. And I also think there's a lot of misinformation and coaches and programs that are sort of selling this dream of becoming a pro athlete or becoming the next Connor McDavid. And, it's just not true at all. And like, you cannot predict success at 9 years old. It's impossible. You're throwing a number in, like, it's just not realistic. But like, how many kids have you guys seen over the years that were unbelievable at 8 years old and the best might hockey player, and then by 15 they hate their parents and drop out of sport altogether? It's like, like, what do we do? Again, going back to John's quote, winning the race to the right finish line. The right finish line is not 9. It's 25, 30, 40. Like, do you love playing hockey when you're 45 and gray and you have kids of your own? Like, to me, that's the right finish line. It's not, as much as we get into this race of like, my might AAA team is unbelievable and they're ranked on my hockey rankings. And it's like, to me, it's just like that's not the point of all of this. And I'm in a unique position where our program can kind of follow that, but there's a lot of people who get sucked into this other system because they have to. There's no other option.
Your program, in my opinion, everything you said is correct. You can get sucked into this stuff really easy. I think everyone's guilty of that in some way at some time. What I love about your program is it inspires the thinking that I think we're all desiring, right? And the things that you're saying, and you're seeing it, right? You're seeing it come out of there. They're playing multiple sports. I always love that metaphor of, if you've only ever had chocolate ice cream, how do you know you don't like vanilla and strawberry, right? It again, seems like common sense. I do want to ask this question. Let's dive into the wheel a little bit here. What does a day look like? What's a month look like? What's a season look like, over a 12-month curriculum here?
Yeah. So all of our sports they follow a seasonal set schedule. So to give you a realistic example, hockey runs from like the middle of September to the end of March. Lacrosse and soccer run from early April till the end of September, early October. So there's a little bit of crossover, which is right now, which is our crazy part of the year, but largely they're seasonal. So I think part of the challenge with the whole multi-sport thing, which is becoming more common, which is great, is that people think that if you play 2 sports 12 months a year, it's multi-sport. And I think that's a bit of a misleading thing, because ultimately you're just playing 2 sports 12 months a year. It's not a multi-sport curriculum. And so our sports are 5 to 7 months at length in total. We have 0 summer programming, which is something that's unique. So July and August, there's nothing, no soccer, no lacrosse. It's totally optional. So for families who want to go away, they want to travel, the kids are off school, like there's no pressure to be there. You're not going to lose your spot on the team. You're not going to miss practices. It just, we shut down for July and August. We run summer camps and stuff, which is more on the recreational side. But for the academy, like the competitive teams, there's no summer programming. So a day in the life, I'll give you an example. This past weekend, we have a U14 hockey team, which is playing at a AA hockey level. Pretty good hockey players. They had their first game of contact this weekend, which was interesting to say the least. And Ian, who was one of our co-founders, coaches the hockey team, which is great. But a lot of those kids play 3 sports. So to give you an example, Friday night they have soccer practice from 7 to 8:30. Saturday morning they had 2 soccer games, one at like 10 o'clock and one at 2 o'clock. They had a hockey practice on Saturday evening, like 5 o'clock. They had lacrosse on Sunday morning and then a hockey game on Sunday night, which to some people sounds like an insane amount of programming. I can see Christy's reaction. Like, that's a lot, right? Now, keep in mind, this is only for 2 or 3 weeks while it crosses over. So that's as busy as it gets. But if you were in a normal system, those schedules would never work together. We have purpose-built those schedules to not overlap. So we can guarantee that, Christy, if you have a son, which it sounds like you've gone through the system, if you have a kid playing all 3 sports, I can guarantee you that those don't conflict, which is impossible at any other club because, they're fighting for the same kid's time. And so we reverse engineer it and say, well, why don't we offer something that loops all 3 together? So, that's a bit of an extreme example of the busyness of a weekend. But even for our U8 kids, 7 years old, they had a hockey game last night, half ice, mind you, which is great. And then they had lacrosse at like 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. And then on Saturday, they had an hour of soccer. And so that's a little bit more, that's the baseline of what we do. But it does scale to the point where, you have 5 or 6 events in a couple of days, which to some is daunting, but to kids that are active and want to be active, I mean, it's like an amazing weekend for them.
And you also eliminate the controversy that you face with other coaches. So if your kid plays hockey, they want to play lacrosse, the hockey coach gets mad because the lacrosse coach wants them at this time. And you're conflicted. Like, well, who am I going to piss off,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
They're not forgiving coaches if you miss practices and games. And I see their side of it because they depend on your kid to be there. It changes the lines. It changes the dynamic of the team if he has kids missing because of another sport. So that was always a struggle for us because my kids did like to play multiple sports. And coaches weren't always on the same page or quite understanding of each other. So that eliminates that whole stress, which is great.
Yeah, well, our hockey coaches know exactly what our soccer kids are doing that weekend. We share a master calendar. So I can have an overview of like what my U14 hockey team is doing today. If they have soccer, we notify the coach, hey, 6 of the kids aren't going to be there tonight. This is why. Please excuse them. It's, it just sort of makes sense to do it like that. But it's not easy. It's difficult to align all the schedules like that because we're fighting with different facilities and permits and
Sure.
it takes a long time to create that. But we spend a few days every spring like hammering those schedules out. But I'm happy with the outcome because it allows kids to play other sports, to your point, without unnecessary pressure to pick one over the other at 9 years old.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'll say this: just this past weekend.
Yeah. So if there's any parent, if there's any,
go ahead, Mike. You're good.
no, I'm
Go
just saying,
Mike.
if there's any parents out there over the age of 40, if there's any parents out there over the age of 40, you're basically describing like what a youth recreation department would look like, right? I mean, back in the day, and that I think travel sports has eliminated the opportunity for kids to even, have that choice. That because of the financial pieces of each sport, it's fracturing our youth communities, and you're solving that issue.
It's making it more about the community-based, recreational, let's go out and play unstructured play for 2 hours after school type of model, but also combining it with the professionalism and the upsides of travel sports. Like all of our sports are local. Most of the kids who play in our centers live within 5 kilometers or a couple miles of where they practice and play. So it eliminates unnecessary travel. The cost is very similar to it's actually less than most of the programs that we're sort of quote unquote competing with. And it's all hyper local. So it is more like the model, like when I grew up, where you went outside and played pond hockey for 2 hours instead of going to a practice. It's similar to that because you don't spend an hour in the car driving for a 50-minute practice to touch the puck 3 times. It's different. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, Mike, is make it more about the kids and not about what we think is best for them.
Again, imagine that. I was going to say, just this past weekend, I'm thinking about my own kids' AA team. We had a kid miss for baseball. I saw one kid go from our game, get into his football play a football game, come back for another game for us, and then the next day he got dressed for something else. I'm like, where do you go? I got lacrosse today. And he has missed games for football, which we're all very understandable of it, but it's crazy. It's just crazy that again, Christy, to your point, there's a lot of where should he be right now?
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, where does he want to be right now? That's kind of what I said.
They get older and they bring their prom dresses to hockey practice.
Oh wow!
So
Did that happen to you?
They can make the game and make the prom at the same time. It happens.
Well, that's another episode we'll have to do about from hockey to the prom. Kev, just keeping this going here. I do have this question too. Is there any issues with the transition from sport to sport to sport, or most of the kids kind of flow right into it?
I would say it's fairly seamless. I mean, not all of the kids play all 3 sports. It's a la carte, so you can pick 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3. And again, some kids don't like soccer or lacrosse or hockey for that matter. We have lots of kids in soccer who don't play hockey. We have lots of kids in lacrosse who don't play anything else. So, the full scope of the model really comes in when kids play all 3, because you see the benefit of the schedule and all of this stuff that we've talked about. But the seasonality of it, I think, makes the change from one to the other a lot easier because there's defined start and end dates. Like if we say soccer ends on September 25th, it ends on September 25th. There's no, spring hockey. There's no, January soccer drop-ins. Like we have some recreational programs that run through the winter that are like once a week kids can come to if they want to. But the point is it's not required to keep your spot on a team. So there's no pressure to be there. The parents don't feel like they have to attend. I mean, the worst thing is like you get to a high level of hockey and the coach says, "Oh, I run a spring team. Why don't you come on my spring team and then maybe you'll make the team in the fall?" And it's like all you're promoting is this idea that you have to play year round to be good or to keep up, which just isn't true. So we've tried to create defined seasonality to it. And I think it's served us well because parents know exactly what their commitment level is for the entire season. They know the schedule before the season starts. They know when it ends. So they can bank around that. They can build their lives around youth sports as opposed to reacting to what youth sports throws at them on a weekly basis. Which, I mean, as a parent, that's magical, right?
I was gonna say it's very Disney-esque the way you just said that. Yeah. Wait, what do you mean I could have control over my schedule? Even the thing you said before about we don't do anything these 2 months. It's like I can go on vacation. I don't have to plan around a tournament.
Right.
So
Kevin, what have you seen as far as retention? So the kids start early.
Yeah.
What's the average length that they'll stay with your organization?
Our retention, I'm quite proud to say, is very high. It's like 95 plus, depending on the age
Wow.
group. Now, there's obviously outlier examples of that. Like, at some point we were trying to move towards a girls hockey program.
Okay.
Ice time is very difficult, as I mentioned, but we have girls soccer and lacrosse. We have girls soccer and lacrosse and boys soccer and lacrosse that are split by gender. With hockey, it's co-ed. So one of the things we have identified is at some point, girls will want to play
Yes.
girls hockey. I know you guys had Kim McCullough on last week, who's from Toronto, and I'm very familiar with her work and what she does. And she was right in that girls will at some point want to move to girls hockey. So one of the holes in our organization we've identified is what happens to girls at 10 or 11 or 12 years and older. And unfortunately, to date, those have been some of the players who have moved on to different programs because of that reason, something we're trying to address. But I'm very happy to say that our retention rates are quite high. And I think part of that reason is because parents don't feel the unnecessary pressure to do more if they're doing other things as well. And I think that takes some of the, what the grass is greener approach. It takes some steam off that kettle because, parents are hopefully having a good experience. Kids are having a good experience in learning. And so unless the kid is way above their team and needs to move on, which, as I mentioned, is something that we address and work with them, then usually they'll stay in the program. There's obviously examples of the opposite, but by and large, it's a pretty high retention rate.
That's very impressive. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's one of the most proud things, I think, for us at least, is just people want to stay because they like the program. And if they don't, that's totally cool. There's 100 other programs within 5 miles of where we live, but if they like it, then there's a spot for them here.
One of the cool things from what you're doing is that it's not just about the sport and the idea that we're talking about. It's also kind of about the science of development and what that actually means. So you're in an interesting position that you get to see the development across multiple sports within one organization. I don't think there's many people out there that could claim that. I think there's a lot of people that jump from sport to sport to sport and say, oh, I watch this and I watch that. But I'd love your take on, what's the good, the bad, and the ugly of development from what you've seen over the last 7 years, right? And ongoing. Yeah. I mean, that must give you a unique perspective on development overall.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the ugly side of development, especially what we do, is sometimes kids can get overloaded with too many things. You talk about, I reference back to the schedule of our U14s this past weekend. That's a lot of sports. Layer on school sports that they're in grade 9, they're tired. They have other priorities. And I think part of our evolution as an organization is realizing that it's not just about what we want. It has to involve the kids and the parents. So we frequently ask for feedback from the parents. We frequently engage with them on kind of where the program is going and where we want it to go, just to gauge what they want as well, because the kids and the parents are an important stakeholder in what we're doing, probably the most important. So our program is nothing if it doesn't serve the needs of the kids. And if it doesn't serve the needs of the kids, then we shouldn't be doing it at all. And so the ugly side of it is balancing that, is trying to figure out, well, what is the right level of development? I mean, in a perfect world, we would interface with the kids' teachers. We would interface with, the people that surround them and figure out a way to make it all work, but that's just not realistic. And so I think that's probably the worst end of the spectrum, which, to be honest, isn't terrible. The upside of the spectrum is seeing kids develop across multiple sports and reference other sports while they're playing a different sport. Like, hockey practices, I'll say to a kid, you remember in lacrosse when you learned how to keep both butts, one, your butt and the butt of the stick down while you pick the ball up? Well, why don't you try that when you skate, to try to get your butt down so that you get on your edges more? And just seeing that light bulb of, hey, I learned this last week in lacrosse or soccer, translate to a different sport, for me is really cool, because it creates this cohesion to our program that isn't found elsewhere. You can go from one sport to the next, and by and large, the philosophy is the same. The development principles are the same. The curriculum is very similar because they're all territory invasion games. They all have a very similar structure. And so the way that we pattern a program is how do we boil that all down to the lowest common denominator and then talk about it in a way that kids will understand. Drawing out crazy phrases like, let's do a 2-1-2 forecheck and we'll get the weak side lot. Like, that doesn't work with kids. It doesn't matter. And so how we talk to 7-year-olds is going to be different how we talk to 14-year-olds. But the coolest part of what we do is seeing it all come together and seeing it all gel and the light bulbs going off. I think that that's what gets me going in the morning, is just seeing kind of that cross, the cohesion between sports. I think that's probably the coolest thing.
I love that you bring it up, and I'll tell you why, because I wish I could be even more equipped to give different examples at my practices. And I think some of the traps that coaches fall into sometimes is, we know the game, and we do, but it's like, well, no, I just want you to do this thing. And it's so obvious to us as coaches, but the kid, like you said, that light bulb might not be going off. And I think you have to have, as a coach at the younger ages, not so much the older ages, but kind of a relentless patience. That's the way I like to describe it. You might have to describe this 20 different ways, 20 different times before they get it. And that's okay, right? And the example that comes to my mind, I'm using my own kid, was that my son's a goalie, and he was having a little bit of issues with his glove hand. So we put him in baseball, solved the problem. I mean, it pretty quickly, actually. Now that's not an issue anymore. But it was searching the other sports and explaining different situations of catching a baseball. And there's a lot, when you think about it, there's a lot of different ways to catch a ball that has improved his hockey game. Now, with that said, I'm going to segue this a little bit too. I am such a hockey mind that, to me, baseball, in my mind, was a conduit to get him better at hockey. And I realized that that's probably not fair to him. And I'm luckily did not say anything like that to him. But I remember thinking, oh, well, catching the ball, that'll help him in hockey. And it was this kind of eye-opening moment for me of like, he should be focused on baseball when he's playing baseball, not thinking about how can baseball make him a better hockey player. And he kind of did that on his own. But can we talk about that with Top Sports for a second about, you just said it, you transition to another sport. It's another opportunity. It's another fun thing. Are you finding the kids are looking forward to lacrosse season at the end of one season? They're looking forward to soccer season. And, hockey's that thing you do in the winter. Do you see that mentality coming back, which is really an old school mentality, right? When we talk to the athletes that grew up kind of before 1985, right? They played sports before that, in the late 1900s, for all the kids listening. The mentality was like, yeah, we didn't play one sport. We went sport to sport to sport. You'd look forward to hockey season because it was after the summer. And are you finding that returning to some of these kids?
Totally. It's funny. On the bottom of our website, the only quote we have on our website is from Wayne Gretzky. And he talks about how at the end of hockey season, he put the gear away, picked up a lacrosse stick, ran track and field, and that's what made him hungry to come back to hockey.
Right.
And that's exactly what we see. We see kids that by the end of a 7-month season, they're tired of one sport. Like 7 months for a 10-year-old, 3 days a week or 4 days a week is a lot to ask, especially from a focus point of view on one thing. And so at the end of March, the kids get into soccer or lacrosse, or perhaps they play baseball at another club or whatever it is. By the time September or October rolls around, they're ready to rock and roll, and they are back in hockey mode. I think you have to miss it in order to want to do it at the highest level. And I think that's a good thing. And by manufacturing that artificially by the way of our schedule, I think we're creating this idea that you don't have to play year round to get the benefit of a sport. You don't have to play 12 months a year. You can chunk it into seasons and still develop. And I think the passion and the excitement piece that you just touched on, Lee, is super important. And it almost underscores the love for sport. If you don't miss it, you don't love it. And if you don't love it, you're not going to continue playing it. Well, I think that's a big part of it.
What's funny is just tapping on the human nature of this. It's not limited to sport. Because when you think about just life relationships, when you don't see somebody for a while and you start to miss them, it reminds you how important that person is. I remember a friend of mine close to me told her boyfriend once, "I need to miss you right now." Like saying like we're together too often and I need a minute. I just need a break to kind of come back into it. And look, you see this sometimes when I go on work trips. Sometimes maybe the kids are frustrating me before. Not that I ever want to leave them, but you go on a work trip for a week, you're ready to come back to them at the end. You want to see them at the end. It's a nice feeling. So I think there's the larger human aspect of this too. But Kevin, to your point, I mean, my family, we do not play hockey in the spring, whether they want to or not. And I've said this on the show before. It is so comforting as a hockey person and a hockey coach and a dad primarily to hear your kids say, which they have, "Hey, when do we start hockey again? I miss playing hockey." If you're playing year round, you're never going to hear that. And I think that you're 100% right for everybody listening that separation is extremely important mentally, physically, emotionally. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at that. And I love that you're providing that. Like you're trying to normalize that. which again goes along with every scientific study that's been done in the last several years. Do you have success stories from within the organization? Yeah, I know it's only been around 7 years, but does anything pop in your mind? Where like, yeah, this kid did this, and here he or she is.
There's a few. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest success metrics that we use is retention, as Christy and I talked about a minute ago.
Yeah.
Like the fact that kids want to stay in our program is really important to us.
Great point.
But I think the other piece that is more of like a societal or social metric is, are they able to get to the same place as their cohort in school without sacrificing as much to get there? And I'll give you an example. We have a kid that plays on our U14 hockey team who goes to a pretty well-known private school here in Toronto, and the hockey team at his grade, he being like middle school, so 7 and 8, is 99% AAA GTHL players, like almost exclusively. He is the one kid who doesn't play AAA hockey playing on that hockey team, and I think that to me is a sign that there's more than one way to get to the same point. And TOP's an acronym. It stands for the other path. It's not meant to be top as in like the best. It's the other path.
I love that.
And we started the other path to provide kids with and parents and families, provide families with a different way to get to the same place that doesn't require the same input. And I think of this kid in particular, that for me is a huge sort of validation for what we're doing, because he spent 7 years in our program. He plays all 3 sports still. He plays them, at the competitive level with us, and he's made this team, and he's an unbelievable athlete. And he's one of the kids where I'm like, well, he might end up somewhere. Again, he's 13, so it's too early to tell. And frankly, it's not like that's what I'm counting on, but he's one where I could see that working out for him long term.
Kevin, I'm just curious, is this a more affordable option for parents? And are there avenues where you can help parents who might struggle to find a way to pay for all 3 sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have what we call an impact fund, which is like it's completely self-funded. It's not government driven. It's not, any sort of outside money. We also have sponsorship available for our hockey programs for parents and companies who want to help out with fees. The reality, especially with hockey, is that ice time is incredibly expensive. Our ice bills per hour are $600 or $700 an hour, which is to me just insane.
That's up there. Yeah, that's Toronto.
Yeah,
that's Toronto.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And we have the.
That's here.
I won't say a lot. It's nuts. The other problem or the challenge is, because we're competing against clubs who've been around for 70 years who are community-based, they have access to all of the city-owned rinks, which are much cheaper. So we have to use private ice, which is like 3 times or 2.5 times more expensive, which is challenging. So we've tried to find ways to drive the cost down. We often have 2 teams using the ice at the same time to reduce costs. We have a tournament-based schedule, which is a little bit more expensive, but allows us to control the schedule so that kids can play other sports. We have sort of a hand-me-down program where kids can hand down jerseys to the next group coming up, so it limits costs on that front. But the reality is, sports are very expensive, and the only way to limit that is either to give more public access to facilities and lower that cost, or to provide financial support to those who need it. And so I think we've done a good job of providing financial options. I think we can always do more. I mean, there's ways that we're trying to do that with sponsorship and community events and fundraising and stuff. But the reality is, it is expensive, and it's something that I think is affecting registration as a whole. It's something that is affecting the quality of our programs, because effectively we're self-selecting out X% of the population because they can't afford to do it. And we acknowledge that problem. It's something that I think we need to work more towards doing and getting better at, but it is something that we've definitely addressed internally, and something that we continue to address by doing things like sponsorship, fundraising, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that is a struggle, and thanks for your honesty with that.
Well, it's only going to get better if we admit it.
Right, and for the parents who want this for their kid, to be squeezed out financially, that's unfortunate.
It happens.
Yeah.
I will say, comparatively, we are still lower than the alternative. Like, our price points are on average, I would say probably 15 to 20% lower than a comparable program. So it's not as if we're 3 times the expense. I mean,
Gotcha.
we are certainly not charging premiums for any of this at all. I would say the biggest challenge is facilities. It's private facilities. The access to those facilities usually comes with like a bulk deal. So you have to buy all of the field time or all of the ice time to get access to what you need, which is challenging. So, as a club, we've addressed that as a challenge and something we need to address more. But yeah, to your point, we're constantly trying to find ways to reduce the cost or provide financial assistance to parents who need it, because we want kids to play sports. That's the bottom line. And if we can find a way to do that works in our model, then we will do that.
For those of us in the US, we don't have anything similar or comparable to what you have. What advice would you give to organizations to kind of pull a little bit of your gold nuggets from what you've learned and incorporate them into our programs here? What advice would you share for organizations out there to make it better for kids and parents and less stress and more fun?
I think, the way we look at it, and I can only share what's worked for us, because again, we definitely are not, we make mistakes like everyone, and we've made mistakes and we're not perfect. But I think what we come back to as our underlying sort of strategy is what's best for the kids. And if you use that as your North Star and every decision you make comes back to that, more often than not, you're going to be right. And again, it's not like everyone wants this model. It's not as if, we have 100,000 kids lined up to come into the program. I think we do a good job of retention, as I said, and we do have a lot of demand. But I think what clubs and organizations can do to affect change like this is root it back to the kids. And if it comes back to the kids and what's better for them, their development, the passion, the character building, then more often than not, you're going to be successful in that goal. And I always come back to that every road ends in beer league something. And regardless if you're Wayne Gretzky or if you're the kid who played house league hockey, every route ends back to the same place. So how can we make it so that kids are having fun, they're staying in it longer, they're enjoying it, they're developing? And I think that's kind of the golden rule that we talk about internally here is like, let's make it about the kids. And if it doesn't help the kids, then why are we doing it? And if there's not a good enough reason, then maybe we should consider not doing it.
Great answer. So simple. Yep, we're missing the mark here.
Well, again, it's not perfect. I mean, again, like things like tryouts are difficult because you have to group. Like it's very difficult not to group by skill, because at some point you do need to keep the top and the bottom of a team close in order to develop as a group. But the problem with tryouts is you're effectively telling a 7 or 8 year old kid that they're not good enough to receive the coaching in that moment that maybe they need long term. There's so many kids that develop later, that play different sports, that maybe can't dedicate the time needed early to become, an early succeeder in that sport. So how do we create a model that's a little bit more balanced? Well, that's challenging and something we are trying to address, but the reality is we have to work with what we have, and it's not always the easiest thing in the world.
I just want to reiterate what you said too. It was a great question, Christy, about in our environments, both in Canada and the United States, how can you even think about implementing something like this? Because I think the takeaway here, Kevin, is I can't imagine anybody listening to this is going, oh, what a horrible, stupid idea that is. Like nobody wants to do it. I think we all are like, wow, I'd love if my organization did that.
Everyone wants to embrace it.
Right. But the answer of that North Star being what's best for the kids. I truly believe that a majority of organizations in hockey have that sentiment. But I think that it gets diluted by parents that are too intense, by competing with other clubs to try and get whatever status you're trying to get. And so I do believe that most directors, most people come with like, yeah, it's about the kids, but it gets lost in translation a lot of times because you're getting torn a lot of different ways. I think that is a great piece of advice, though. Prioritize that. That has got to come first. And if you explain that to your parents and your kids in the organization, and they really fight you on it, which I think that would be hard to believe, right? I think you got to question what you're doing or why you're doing what you're doing at that point anyway, right? Because I can't imagine that a majority of parents wouldn't want what's best for their kids with the science that is backing this, with the understanding of that, of putting those kids first, both mentally, physically, as athletes, understanding that you have to stop sometimes. Mike, I am going to throw it to you in a second here because like the truth is this, some of this is not realistic within our organizations, right? In the way that we look at things and the, I'll say the capitalistic nature of it, which I'm not poo-pooing on capitalism. I'm just saying like that's part of it, right, Mike? So what are your thoughts on this again, Mike, from a North Star standpoint? Are you seeing that across the board, and how can we emphasize that or put an exclamation point on that in some of the organizations we work with?
Yeah, I'm not sure we can put the horse back in the barn. I think it's going to take, people like Kevin and Top Sports and building alternate athletic realities for families to make those choices. Right. I don't think the choices are really there right now until somebody builds them. But I think through Kevin's success and with his group, once you build that there are more people. I say that every day to all these travel programs. My money is worth just as much as the AAA parents' money. And I have more of it to spend because I'm not going to Toronto 17 times a year. And, spend it in my building, and I think as long as parents can understand that your son and daughter are not elite, if they roll their hockey bag into the rink, they are not an elite athlete. Right. So if we can just understand that piece of it and get back to the saneness of sports, as Kevin adheres to, in his model is, bring that sanity into sport where let the market handle kind of where it goes. And I think, but people have to take the chance to building these type of programs, so we don't allow these big, huge, massive youth programs and travel programs to take over our youth.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Mike. And Kevin, throwing it back to you too. This is my last question, but you set a sturdy foundation. You now have a resume of success doing what you do. You're seeing the things happen. So now what is the future look like for what you're trying to do? Is it opening up more top sports organizations across Canada and potentially the United States? Is it just expanding on your own? Like what is the business North Star, if I can call it that, for top sports moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. Something we wrestle with daily. Our main location is Midtown Toronto, like central Toronto. We started that in 2017. We're about 1,000 athletes now, 1,000 kids now, across the three sports. We've opened 2 new locations as of September 1st of this year, so a few weeks old, in suburbs of Toronto. So there's one called Richmond Hill, which is just north of Toronto, and Oakville, which is just west of Toronto. And we're going to be opening a third new location east of Toronto in Whitby or Ajax, in 2026. The ultimate goal here is actually to create our own infrastructure within the 4 clubs. So as if, we create our own leagues and tournaments and, going back to controlling the schedule and controlling the way that we deliver these programs, it helps if we can control the other organizations as well. And so we've had a good start in the 2 areas that we've opened, Richmond Hill and Oakville here in the GTA, the Toronto area. We're going to be opening a 4th one next year. So, that's kind of our 5-year plan. From there, we, assume it all goes well and it doesn't just, drop on our feet. We have goals to open in the U.S. at some point in the next 10 years. And I think
that's awesome.
The difference being between Canada and the U.S. from where I sit is the U.S. is a heck of a lot bigger, firstly.
Well, yes, the population difference. I just want to bring this up because I always think people don't realize the population difference between Canada and the United States. It's not just the size. It is massively larger in the United States. Yeah. Not to mention a majority of the Canadian population is in the area that you're in. So it is. They are different worlds with that. I apologize. I always like to bring that up.
Yeah, but this is the funny thing, right? That when you look at growing a sport or growing a mission like this, that we talked to a group that wanted to build a rink down in the Bronx, and there's literally, if you put a rink in the Bronx, there's more kids that live in the Bronx than the whole state of Minnesota, like just in the Bronx. I'm just probably within a couple of blocks. So if you really wanted to make the biggest impact, make access to people within a place for them to be able to walk into a rink and play. And I think that's really where the NHL comes in. That's where, our governing bodies come in, Hockey Canada and USA Hockey, and creating these vehicles for more kids to get involved for longer periods of time, and then let the cards lay out where they are. I mean, we'll find out when they're 18 or 19 years old if we give access. And I think that's what you're doing. And it's awesome that, you're able to provide professional level coaching and passion with an accessible program.
Yeah, that's a good way to summarize it, Mike. I mean, I think for us, again, it comes back to the kids. I mean, we've had conversations with the NHL a few years ago about what we're doing, and they were very supportive, which was great. I mean, I think for us, we need to prove the concept works first in order to take it elsewhere, of course.
Sure.
I think we've done a good job over the last couple of years of baking out the full pathway. I mean, even right now, our oldest kids are 15, so they're U16. So when those kids get to 17, 18, 19, like 16, 17, 18, we're going to continue the pathway all the way through. And then we'll have a full scale from 4 to 18. I think that's, once that point hits, which will be 2027, we'll have a much better idea as to what the full pathway looks like, and then how to transplant that model to other areas. And I think, the U.S. is intriguing because, again, the population is massive, a lot bigger than here. But I think this whole multi-sport approach might actually resonate more in the U.S. than Canada, purely because the population size is massive. There's a lot more offerings. There's a lot more private organizations and travel sports. It's common, or more common, in the U.S. Not the multi-sport piece, but these independent sort of programs that are coming up. And I think in Canada, it's the opposite. It's community-based programs that are, have done the same thing for 70 years and are promoting the game insofar as it helps their programs. And I think that's a tricky thing for me to swallow, is it's not about the clubs. It's about the kids. It has to be. And if we as adults and directors of programs are only focused on growth within our club, that's a problem, because then it starts to get into this power hungry game of, I had this kid first, or I developed this kid to the D1 level, or whatever the case is. And I think it has to be the opposite. And it's not perfect. And I'm not criticizing anyone in particular. It's just a reality. But in the US, it seems like it's more open to innovation. And I think that is exciting for us. It's exciting for me. There's a lot of steps in between that point for us and where we are now, but that's kind of the 5 to 10 year goal horizon for us is growing it, spreading the multi-sport message, spreading what we do and why it's important and why it's different. And then if it works, that's the hope, right? You can never know until you try it, but that's the goal.
Mike, Christy, I'm jealous. I mean,
I know.
Oh man,
I wish we had this option when my kids were growing up. I found my son's journal the other day when he was in 4th grade, and he wrote to his teacher. He was so upset, dear teacher, because they had to do journals back and forth with the teacher at that time. And I found one page where he said, "I'm so upset because I want to try out for basketball, but my hockey coach said no because it would conflict. What should I do?" And the teacher wrote back to him, "Maybe you can talk to your hockey coach and you can work it out with him." And he ended up not going out. And I didn't even know that he wanted to do this. I
should have led the episode with that letter. Jeez, that's
sad.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That's
the reality.
It breaks my heart that he never even came to me, that he wanted to play basketball. And he was so worried that he would let his hockey team down. So, yeah.
Well, and Kevin, this is why we love what you're doing. And I want to end the episode by saying this, that I think the most dangerous phrase in the English language, this is a quote, obviously, is that this is the way it's always been done. And you're challenging that. And I love people that challenge the status quo and say, no, look, there's a better way. And I think that it takes a lot of guts, takes a lot of leadership, takes a lot of money, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources to do those things. But the people that do them truly believe in the reasoning behind what they're doing. There's no way you're doing this without extreme care for these kids. So I just want to, on behalf of all of us, applaud you for that. And the fact that you're doing something that is really going to transform sports in the future. I think that even just the study and the science that's going to come out of this is going to push this forward. And it needs to be done. because I don't like to say things like, wow, we're going in the wrong direction right now. But I don't think we're going in the right direction. And I can say that. I think youth sports still provides more good than bad for kids at the end of the day, just from a life lesson standpoint. But you are just exceptional with what you're doing. And I cannot thank you enough for this work. It's fantastic.
That's nice to hear. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think you're right. We have a delusional belief that what we're doing is the right way to do it. And I think if you don't have a delusional belief in what you're doing and believe it till the end of the earth, then I think you're not going to do it to the level that you need to do it. And it's not without challenges, as you mentioned. It's not without adversity and people pulling in the other direction. And this is the wrong way to do it, whatever the case is. But again, for me, for all of our team here at Top, what we do, it just comes back to the kids. It comes back to what's best for the kids. How can we change and offer something that's different, that may be a better option for some kids, not for all, but for some? And how can we, create more perspective in youth sports and make it a little bit more sensible and balanced? And that's sort of the crux of what we do. And again, it's been a crazy hell of a 7 years trying to do this and get it off the ground. And every day is different. Every day is a challenge. One day you're the janitor, the next day you're the CEO, and it's all good, because at the end of the day, I was at a practice last night and there's 25 kids on the ice, and every single one of them I coached when they were 6 or 7 years old, and they came off the ice, high fives, hey Coach Kev, what's going on? Like, that to me is like, that's why we do it. It's just about that. It's not about the NHL or the Premier League. It's about the kids. And if we can keep that in our focus as we troubleshoot all the problems and challenges, it's not always easy, but it makes it worth it.
I think that's a great place to end this, buddy. I mean, you said it all. And again, you are a bright star. Your organization's a bright star that I think we all should follow. If you're delusional, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow the delusional guy. That's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. There's no way you left this one without a good feeling and some ideas for your organization. Remember, you can text us. There's a link accompanying this episode in the show notes. Tap it. You're texting right to us. If you have ideas for the show, if you have a question for Kevin, we'll forward it to him. And as always, you can always email us at team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. But for Kevin Shire, I love that name, by the way, Christy Casciano Burns, and Mike Benelli, I'm Leo Elias. We'll see you on the next edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, everybody. Have a great week and skate on. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.